All right, good evening. It is 7 p.m. in NYC and 1 a.m. in the Abruzzo region of southern Italy. I'm Sam Kimball from Crush Wine Experiences, formerly New York Wine Events. Thank you so much for joining us for this virtual day trip to wine country presented by Citi. We are here for great value selections from the rustic and wild region of Abruzzo, Italy. And as our guest speaker likes to say, Italian wines with American attitude. The winery we're visiting with is Dagostino Wines. They make the wines in a small town in Italy on the Adriatic Sea called Ortona. And Ortona is a coastal town. It's in the region in southern Italy of Abruzzo. And I will show you very quickly where we're headed on the map, because it's instructive to see. You can see that red map pin above my shoulder in the background. So we're on the coastline of the Adriatic Sea, which means it is a maritime climate, and that is great for growing wines. So our theme tonight is great taste, great value, and classic Italian selections. And we're going to do some pairing with cheeses that you can easily find at your local supermarket or your local gourmet cheese shop. And we'll be profiling two wines specifically, the Dagostino Montepulciano d'Abruzzo, and we'll be pairing it with two different cheeses, one a Scamorza and two Parmigiano Reggiano, which we can all attest to enjoying. And the second wine is the Dagostino Pinot Grigio, and we're going to be pairing that with the Humboldt Fog Chèvre goat cheese, which is a wonderful cheese from California. So what about Abruzzo, you might ask? It's not as famous as Tuscany or Piedmont in Italy, or even for that matter, Sicily. But Abruzzo has long been one of Italy's most storied wine regions. It's a mountainous coastal region in central Italy along the Adriatic Sea. And so, as I mentioned a moment ago, it is a maritime climate. That's where you get those diurnal shifts in temperature from hot in the day down to cooler at night. It lets the grapes recover, and it's great for the cultivation of wine grapes. And it's also one of the oldest wine growing regions in the world, known for some particular wine grape varieties. For example, the red wine grape, Montepulciano, and the white wine grape, Trebbiano d'Abruzzo. And there are some lesser known and terrific varietals that come out of the Abruzzo region as well. Passarina, Cococciola, and Pecorino, just to name a few. And I'm not talking about the cheese, I'm talking about the wine Pecorino, which is one of my favorite white wines. You got to remember, there are 1,000 wine grapes or wine varietal grapes in Italy alone. And they make wine from pretty much all of them every year. So I always like to say Americans, and I include myself in this, are a little bit boring, and we stick in our comfort zone, and we drink the same 5 or 6 grapes: Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, etc., Pinot Noir. And the fact of the matter is there's all these grapes in the world, 5,000 in total. So one of the great things about a session on Italian wine is we get to experience other wine grape varietals, which is really fun. So let's talk stats and Dagostino wines. These are handcrafted boutique wines. They only make a few thousands of each of these selections a year, and they're brought into the US. So if you happen to like the sound of these selections, or if you've already bought a couple bottles online before our session, make sure to take advantage of this evening. We have, as usual, a special offer and a couple discount codes. These are not wines you will find in every single liquor store, wine and shop across America. They are boutique, handcrafted wines. The stats are that they make about 3,200 cases of the Montepulciano d'Abruzzo and 2,500 cases of the Pinot Grigio, the two wines that we're profiling tonight. The discounts are great, and I encourage you to take advantage of them. I want to welcome everybody. Thank you guys again for tuning in. Welcome all. Please ask any questions or make any comments in the chat along the way, and we will answer them as we go on the fly during the session. Also, if you would hit the chat right now, I see a bunch of people have already, and let us know where in the world you are tuning in from. It's great to see Brooklyn in the house, Long Island, New Jersey, North Carolina, California. Awesome. Great to see everybody. Some new names and some new faces, and also some folks that we've seen before, and it's great to see the return visitors. East Northport, New York. Love it. So let's take a look at a video that I found that's from our friends at Vini d'Abruzzo, which is the Wine Growers Association for Abruzzo in Italy. And so bear with me a moment. I'm going to put that up on the screen and share my screen. It is wonderful, very interesting. Couple minutes of video, and then we'll dive back in and we'll start tasting wine momentarily. So here we go. A little bit about the Abruzzo region of Italy.
2,000 years ago, in the heart of Peligna Valley in Abruzzo, members of the Italic League made Corfinium the first Italian capital. At that time, the Roman poet Ovid already wrote about the fertility of the land and its vocation for vine cultivation. Over the centuries, the cultivation of native Abruzzo vines has spread from the Peligna Valley to the hills regions close to the coast, present conditions to produce fine grapes, which then are carefully transformed into great wines. Abruzzo region has a natural vocation for the cultivation of vines. The presence of the Gran Sasso and Maiella mountains, a short distance from the Adriatic Sea, generate strong temperature variations between day and night that, combined with good ventilation, provide an ideal microclimate to produce grapes of extraordinary quality. Vineyards are trained on traditional trellis systems called Tinduni Abruzzese, which is typical of the region, as well as on vertical trellis system. In 1968, Montepulciano d'Abruzzo wine was recognized with a controlled designation of origin. Vineyards in Abruzzo cover approximately 32,000 hectares of land, with an average annual production of about 3.5 million wine hectoliters. The most widespread varieties are Montepulciano, cultivated on 17,000 hectares, and Trebbiano, cultivated on over 12,000 hectares of land. Other indigenous vine varieties, such as Pecorino, Passarina, Cococciola, and Montonico, have increasingly become popular in the market. Germany, the United States, and Canada are the principal international markets, while the English, Scandinavian, Japanese, and Chinese markets are booming. The crown jewel of the Abruzzo wines is certainly the Montepulciano d'Abruzzo, which accounts for more than half of regional production and is now universally recognized as one of the great Italian reds. Also much appreciated is its rosé interpretation, the Cerasuolo d'Abruzzo. Noteworthy among the whites are Trebbiano d'Abruzzo, which yields both pleasant young wines and wines of extraordinary longevity. The Pecorino, a high-quality wine with enhanced fruit and bouquet. And finally, the Passarina, Cococciola, and Montonico, still wines that complete the Abruzzo family of great wines.
All right, guys. That was very cool to see. And I got to tell you, if you haven't had Pecorino, I know we're profiling Pinot Grigio tonight, but if you haven't had Pecorino, you are in for a treat, an absolute treat. That is another wonderful white wine coming out of that part of Italy. So anyway, I thought it would be interesting to see the origins and where these wines are coming out of in the region. And that's a pretty good primer there in that video about Abruzzo. And like I said earlier, not as famous as Tuscany or Piedmont, or Sicily even, but really, really got some great wines. Think these are wines. These are great everyday wines. If you have a few bottles in the house, they're wonderful for just any kind of meal. And we'll talk about pairing them with cheeses. But these are great ones to hang on to. So I, without further ado, would like to bring in our guest, who is the founder of Dagostino Wines, Greg Dagostino. Welcome, Greg. It is amazing and great having you on the show tonight.
Thanks, Sam. Thank you for having me, and welcome to everybody. I'm glad to have you as our guests, and I'm here to help you explore these wonderful wines.
Where does this broadcast find you? Are you in Abruzzo as we speak?
Unfortunately not. I'm at my home residence, or Dag Wine headquarters, at Harbor Point in Stamford, right on the Long Island Sound. And as we are speaking, I can look over the camera and look out across the Long Island. It's an absolute beautiful evening.
We're getting that late summer, wonderful end of days, and on a beautiful day like today, it's terrific. It's picturesque. So tell
Absolutely.
us,
Absolutely.
how did you come to make wines from Abruzzo? You're obviously Italian-American in heritage. Was the Dagostino family originally from Abruzzo? Were they from a place near Ortona where the wines are made? And what's the connection?
Well, my grandfather emigrated from Abruzzo at the age of 14. He actually was more towards the mountain in the foothills in the L'Aquila region, from the town of Bugnara. Not suitable for wine, or let's say vine growth. So I'm more down in the valley, closer to the Adriatic Sea in the Chieti region. We produce the wines in Ortona, and the vineyards are in the surrounding areas along the Adriatic coast and moving up into the foothills. So there's lots of beautiful climatic interaction to make beautiful wines. When my grandfather came over here when he was 14 years old, a very typical story for many people who may be watching, parents, grandparents coming from other regions of the world to the United States to follow their dreams. And he started working on the streets of New York, selling fruits and vegetables from a push cart. And from there founded Dagostino Supermarkets, the iconic supermarket of New York. And I worked there as a child, but I got into the wine business. And all the time during that time from 1994 until present day, people would say, Dagostino, you mean like the supermarkets Dagostino? And I told the story so many times that I decided, hey, every wine has a story. Why can't this story have a wine? Having worked closely with growers, producers, producing wines, brands, I had good connections. So I followed those connections to Italy, and I put together wine growers, winemakers, and production facilities to bring this unique wine to the United States as an expression of our Italian heritage, and basically the American story that my grandfather helped build. And as many people have done in the past, it's just a great transition from American or Italian to American, Italian-American experience. And that is expressed in these wines.
And along the way, you ran into a customs official in Italy who referenced the name Dagostino, said he was named Dagostino, and then what happened?
That was so hilarious because, you know, I always threatened to do this project. I had a great job. I was working in many capacities. I've sold everything from Rigniti to Rothschild. And my last position was working with the negociants over in Bordeaux, selling investor grade wine. It was absolutely fantastic. But I always had this itch to do the project. So I teamed up with some people over in Italy. I did my research. I did my tasting, my work, looking at the land, trying to figure out where we would select our grapes to make the wine. And I was flying back and I said to myself, I don't know, you know, yeah, I can do this, but should I do this? I don't know. Will people understand? And I was going through customs, and the gentleman, the officer looked at my passport, looked down, and then said, hey, Dagostino. I'm a Dagostino too, just like a supermarket in New York City. And I said at that moment, I've got to do it. You know, so many times I've told this story, but never did I expect that a common person in Italy would be so proud of his name and having traveled to New York to associate with the supermarkets. It's a gorgeous story. And I knew that was the sign to do it. So here we are.
That's great. That is great. And what would you say is the calling card? I ask this question a lot, and so for those in the audience who have seen us before here, I'll ask, what's the calling card of this winery, of these wines, of Dagostino wines? What is the distinctive characteristic about the wine?
Well, you brought it up earlier, my tagline, the Italian wine with the American attitude. Being that I've sold wine in the United States, coast to coast, since 1994, I started to understand very clearly what Americans like in their palate style. Yes, it's very diverse, but there's certain things that they like. And they like bright fruit. They like good balance. They like wines that go well with food, but also go well with mood. So if you're with family, friends, enjoying your best meal, or just having some alone time after work to enjoy a wine, something that's easy to drink, accessible to drink, but also accessible to the pocket. And what we did was stylize these wines so they're perfectly balanced, very easy to drink, and fit every occasion in our American lifestyle. It's sort of like Italian-American food. Is it Italian food? No. Is it American food? No. It's Italian-American food. It's about the Italian heritage, being resourceful, using the products that you have available to you, and adapting to a new environment. So what we did was try to keep these authentically Italian and just make them a little bit American, a little bit more robust, a little bit more high tone. And it's been a great success. People love the wines.
So I'm going to tell the quick story of when I met you a few months ago, and you were sampling and showing the wines at a retail shop in Long Island. And I tasted the Montepulciano Abruzzo, and I loved it right away. I loved the balance. I loved the smoothness of it. It had that oomph, which I think is the American attitude that you talk about. And then when I tried the Pinot Grigio, it was the same thing, and just tremendous acidity, refreshing, and it had that fruit forward nature to it, but also very balanced. I would say the word for me for these two wines, which is why I love them for, like, picking up 6 bottles or a case and having it as the wine we drink at dinner on any given night, is that they're balanced. And to me, that's a wonderful quality and a huge plus in both of these. So last question, and then we'll start tasting some wine and talking about cheese and pairing and stuff. How did you end up producing the wine in Ortona along the Adriatic Sea there?
Well, I went to many different regions within Abruzzo, speaking with some friends who introduced me to growers, producers, winemakers. And what I found is that I had access to a great facility in Ortona. The vineyards were in the region around Ortona, so it was a very easy coupling of resources to produce the wine. I know the families who produce the grapes on the land. I put them together with another friend who's an enologist, and we use a facility in Ortona to produce, age, and bottle the wines. And the thing that I like so much, as you mentioned before, the maritime influences, is that you have those beautiful vineyards that snuggle up right to the coast, and you get all that influence, the salinity from the breezes, but also you get the influences from the Apennine Mountains, a little cool air at night. So it's just a wonderful region, and the people are just beautiful. And I have to tell you, if anybody wants to go to Italy on the cheap, Abruzzo is the place to go. It's the largest green area in all of Europe. It's only an hour and a half outside of Rome. They have 9 ski areas overlooking 45 miles of the most preserved land. They have the most parks and preserved land in all of Italy, and it's known as the green lung of the Mediterranean. Absolutely beautiful area, and living is easy, and value. So I thought, you know what? People are doing everything in Tuscany. They're doing things in Piedmont. They're doing things in the Veneto and down in Sicily. And Abruzzo, much like the south of France, just needed a little bit of boost, get these people away from large production facilities and go to growers and say, look, you have a great plot of land. We can make some great wine. So we're going through a revolution as they did in the south of France, like Le Clap Syrah. Before they used to sell that off to large producers, but certain people were able to select vineyards and convince people to produce and do a little bit more thinning of the crop to produce better berries. And that's what we did. We followed that format, and it's been a great experience. And I urge everybody listening to please visit Abruzzo.
So, and on that point, Steve asked a question a moment ago. Is your wine sold in Italy, or is it just brought into the U.S. And sold in the U.S. only? What's the provenance of the wine and where people consume it?
It is only sold in the United States. It's also available in Bermuda, of all places. But things triangulate between New York, out on the east end of Long Island and Bermuda. There's just a whole network of people who tend to travel in those same circles. So it was almost accidental that we got there. But it's very funny. The producer is so pleased with the success of the wine that he's asked me that maybe we should look at the project of selling the wine in Italy too.
I think it's great. Well, listen, it's your surname is a well-known name in Italy, and it's also, as you pointed out, there are people in Italy who know how famous your surname is in the U.S. So not a bad idea. Nancy asks, how many wines do you produce?
Well, we're only producing these 2 wines right now. I've had a rosé project on hold because we have to get it right. We are going to release a rosé in the spring. And then you mentioned before Pecorino. Pecorino was actually my first choice, but I was able to find and source this Pinot Grigio that's absolutely fantastic. And that could possibly be the next wine. And as we discussed earlier, Sam, Trebbiano, Cocacciolo, there are so many varietals that are great in Abruzzo. They just need to be reintroduced. And then from Abruzzo, we could venture on maybe down to Apulia with a Primitivo, or up to the Valdo Biadne and produce a Prosecco. So really,
the sky's the limit.
Possible. That's it.
It is. I will remind all of our friends and guests with us that Italy produces more wine than any other country on the planet. It's the #1 producer of wine in volume in the world. So, and there's a lot of good wine that we don't ever see in the U.S. And I think that Greg is onto something special in that regard. All right, so we're going to start tasting. We're going to flip the script, and we're going to start with the red, the Dagostino Montepulciano d'Abruzzo Riserva 2016. And I am going to pair it with a Scamorza cheese and also Parmigiano Reggiano. I tried to get the Caciocavallo, but my local cheese store didn't have the Caciocavallo, so I got Scamorza instead. But tell us a little bit about this Montepulciano d'Abruzzo. What are some of the foods that you like to pair it with, and how did you sort of settle on this particular orientation in terms of the development of the wine and the balance?
Well, we're harvesting the grapes from 35 to 40-year-old vines that are facing southeast and southwest in the area of Chieti, or the province of Chieti, within the region of Abruzzo. And we do something a little bit special. We have extended maceration. We leave it on the skins for 21 days, but then we age the wine after vinification 2 years in oak to make a reserve level wine. And what I did that is a little bit special is that we use the same small French oak barrels, or barriques, that they use in Bordeaux, because having sold so much Bordeaux, I knew about having something that is smooth and elegant. And I was thinking about the consumer and about foods and about their lifestyle, if it's just from, having a cocktail to a full meal. So this is a very versatile wine if you're to have it with cheese and meats, all the way up to a steak. But I would say that, if you like lamb, and lamb is the #1 protein produced within Abruzzo, it is the lamb wine. It's absolutely fantastic. So you can have it with cheese. You can have it with a steak. You can have it with grilled chicken. You can have it with whatever you want to have to pair it with. I'm a person of no rules. If you want to have it with grilled salmon or planked salmon that has enough smoke and weight to it, it will pair nicely. So if you're not familiar with Montepulciano d'Abruzzo and you like Pinot Noir, you'll find that a very easy transition, because it's got good fruit, it's well balanced, it's not too heavy, and it's just absolutely spectacular.
This wine, to me, is special in that it has structure and really nice body, and it's got some punch, but it's smooth like a Mercedes-Benz going down the road. It just is. It's almost velvety. And I'm used to Montepulciano d'Abruzzo sometimes being like great, but a little bit overpowering. And this has got finesse.
Well, that's from the hand harvesting, the cluster selection, and also the oak aging using the French oak. There's the motto of Abruzzo is forte e gentile, strong and gentle. So you have the structure, but you don't need to overdo it. And that's what we try to do with this wine. Absolute great aromatics. The color is fantastic. 2016 is a beautiful vintage, and we're going to follow it up with a 2018 vintage. We're going to skip the 2017. But 2016 is a fantastic vintage. It's absolutely just a gorgeous, gorgeous wine.
I'm going to share my screen and show this wine for everybody. This is it. Montepulciano d'Abruzzo 2016. And it's a reserve. It's a reserve wine. 2 years in oak barrels. I find myself drinking more and more white these days, but when I taste a red like this that has that elegance and the smoothness, as well as the character and the oomph, I love it. It's this is a great wine for every day, but it's also a great wine for a special occasion. So
I'm going to jump in here for a moment. With that said, when we met at a tasting, I do so many tastings, and so many people say, well, I like white wine. I really don't like red wine, because a lot of red wines are overblown, they're overwrought, they're overworked. And I turn them on to this wine, and they say, wow, I really like that. It's so elegant and smooth. So I think, even if you're a white wine drinker and you're watching, you should really try this wine to see what the opportunities are to diversify your selection and your enjoyment of wine.
I got to tell you, I'm loving it with the Parmigiano Reggiano. And the cheese shop in my town had this great Tomcat Bakery baguette. And so even just with the bread alone, this wine is really spectacular. Love it. Let's move on to the Pinot Grigio, Greg.
Sure.
This was the second wine.
Yes.
that you developed.
Yes.
And tell us a little bit about how you settled on this particular style and the shape of this wine as you evolved it.
Well, it's very funny that I started with only the Montepulciano at first, and everybody said, "You're crazy, Greg. You can't start a business with one wine." I said, "Well, brick by brick, we're going to build the wall correctly." And I was looking at the Pecorino and Trebbiano, and I was introduced to these growers through my friends who produce my Montepulciano, and the vineyards are right on the coast of the Adriatic Sea. I said, Pinot Grigio. I was thinking of something a little bit more exotic. And I tasted the previous vintage, and I was blown away. Of course, here in the United States, people think of Trentino Alto Adige, the Colli Orientali up in the Veneto region, where they produced most of the Pinot Grigio. But what I found in this wine, due to the salinity from the Adriatic breezes, and when you add salt to cooking or baking, it lifts the fruit, but also the cooling winds from the Apennine Mountains to get that stress on the vine, just produced a Pinot Grigio like I've never tasted before. And the great thing about it is that the aromatics, the mouthfeel, tend to lean a little bit more towards the Sauvignon Blanc. Bright fruit, good acidity, great balance. And people are just blown away. I'm so pleased every day introducing the wine to the market. And people say, Pinot Grigio. You know, I used to drink Pinot Grigio, or, and they taste it and they're like, wow, this is something else. So it was just, I resisted it at first, but I had to do it because the wine is just so delicious. People are familiar with the varietal. And I thought, why don't we just put a new spin on an old favorite? So that's how we came up with the Dagostino Pinot Grigio. All stainless steel. So it's nice and bright, good acidity, balance. It's just wonderful wine. Wonderful wine.
Yeah, this wine is delicious. It's also at $14.99. This is almost half the price of Santa Margherita Pinot Grigio, which is so many Americans go to on Pinot Grigio, mainly because they just don't know others. But to me, this is a classic example of something that's as good or better and a much better value for the consumer.
And especially with those great discounts that are offered at tonight's tasting through winegems.net. It makes it a great value.
Yeah, and I want to show real quick here. I put the Montepulciano d'Abruzzo with the Humboldt Fog goat cheese, but just ignore that. It's really, guys, the pairing is the Pinot Grigio with this Humboldt Fog. And I have no affiliation with Humboldt Fog, but I will tell you that Humboldt Fog is a goat milk cheese made in California in Humboldt County. And it's named for the local ocean fog, which rolls in from Humboldt Bay. And Humboldt Fog is it's mold ripened cheese. So you see that you see the mold in the ripening there around the edges, and then in the middle it's got this edible white ash, and it's absolutely spectacular, and it's really great with the Pinot Grigio. It's pretty good with the Montepulciano too, but technically the pairing is Pinot Grigio and the Humboldt Fog goat cheese. Are there any Santa Margherita fans watching? Hit us in the chat. I dare you to try this Pinot Grigio from Dagostino. It may crowd out some of your shelf space at home if you're a Santa Margarita fan.
Well, we've been in that process, Sam. And the one thing, I'm sitting here after tasting the wine, it leaves my mouth wet, or I keep on salivating, which is great for food. It's cleansing. It promotes salivation in the mouth, which is perfect for any type of cuisine. But I still, with both these wines, I'm still pretty amazed at the level of the wine in the glass. And I say to myself, how did I do this? And you know what? It's really an extension of the story of my grandfather, who came over here with no plan. I mean, just to make it, and just challenging himself every day to do better and better and better. It seems to me that much of the wine industry, with all the scores and publications, everybody wants to be the best, but sometimes it's just better to be better. So that's what we're trying to do every day. We're just trying to be better every day. And these wines live up to that.
Absolutely. And that's why I keep saying, I think they're great wines for every day, but they're also wonderful for special occasions. I think also we should note, and I'm biased because my daughter's name is Josephine. You had a grandmother named Josephine who married your grandfather, and she was as much an architect of the success of the Dagostino family and the supermarket business as your grandfather. The two of them together were kind of an unbeatable pair.
Well, it's very funny that her father and uncle owned the greengrocer grandfather bought with his brother. After working on the push carts, my grandfather was a butcher. His first job was at Butterfield Market on Lexington Avenue, and the Tucciaroni family had their store on 83rd Street and Lexington Avenue. One of the brothers left the business, and my grandmother's father, my great-grandfather, lost the business during the Depression. And my grandmother was known as being the keen one, and she kept the books at the age of 16. She would keep the books and run the business. She said to my grandfather, either you buy the business or I'm not going to marry you. So that was, really, I found out, reading, articles and speaking to my grandparents, that my grandfather was a successful guy, but he couldn't have done it with Josephine. She was really the impetus behind the whole thing. It's an amazing story. And it's only in America that these things happen. And the one thing I must say, with everything that's going on in the world today, we must remember these wines as being part of the American experience. And it's just been such a pleasure to introduce these wines.
The other thing I want to say is I stand corrected. Thank you, Scott. I should have said that the multiple chapter Abruzzo has punch, but it has the smoothness like riding down the street, not in a Mercedes, but in a Maserati. That would have been a better metaphor.
Or let's make it more accessible. Let's just say a Stelvio.
Okay, a Stelvio.
An Alfa Romeo Stelvio.
There you go. It should have been an Italian vehicle. Well, Greg, I want to thank you so much for spending time with us. I love the story, and I love the fact that every wine needs a story, and you've brought your family legacy and story to this. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Sam, and thank you for everybody joining us this evening. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and thank you guys for tuning in. Come back next week. Actually, 2 weeks from now, the 29th, we are going to do a wonderful session with Cask Spirits, which is a craft distillery in New York State, one of almost 200 craft distilleries in New York State. And we're going to do cocktail mixology. And Cask makes spirits that are out of Eastern Europe. They make them right here in New York State, but they are from Eastern Europe, and a wonderful tradition. So thank you again, Greg. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we will see you very soon. Cheers. Everybody. Okay.
All righty.
Good night.
All right.